When wildfires spread across Los Angeles, everyone blamed nature, but Kamala Harris found something far more shocking behind it all. January 2, 2025, a month etched in the memory of Californians as the wildfires that swept through Los Angeles became the largest natural disaster of the decade. Relentless Santa Ana winds fueled flames that devoured entire neighborhoods, reducing over 10,000 structures to ash. The sky turned an apocalyptic orange, smoke blanketing the city as if nature itself was mourning. The fires were not just a tragedy, they were a crisis that pushed firefighters, emergency responders, and ordinary citizens to their limits. Families fled their homes with only moments to spare, their lives uprooted in a matter of seconds. Wildlife scattered, their habitats destroyed, as helicopters dropped gallons of water that barely made a dent in the inferno. For many, it seemed as though nature's fury had no end. Amidst this chaos, one figure quietly moved through the wreckage: Vice President Kamala Harris. Visiting California for a series of official engagements, her focus quickly shifted as the full scale of devastation became apparent. Touring evacuation centers, she listened intently to the heart-wrenching stories of displaced families. A firefighter's words stuck with her: "These fires, they're different. It's almost like they have a purpose." Something about the pattern of destruction felt wrong. Kamala's sharp instincts caught an anomaly others seemed to overlook. Was it mere chance, or was there a sinister hand at play? The vice president, known for her tenacity, couldn't ignore the unease gnawing at her. Little did she know, her curiosity would lead her down a dangerous path, a discovery so shocking it would change everything we thought we knew about the fires. But the deeper she delved, the clearer it became: someone, or something, didn't want the truth to come to light. What was really behind these catastrophic wildfires? Stay tuned to uncover the mystery. Amid the chaos of January 2025's catastrophic wildfires, Vice President Kamala Harris found herself in the heart of a disaster unlike any other. As she stood near the charred remains of what was once a vibrant Los Angeles neighborhood, the air was thick with ash, and the acrid scent of burning wood lingered. Firefighters worked tirelessly in the distance, their silhouettes barely visible through the orange haze that now shrouded the city. The scale of destruction was overwhelming, and yet, amidst the overwhelming tragedy, Kamala's sharp eye noticed something strange, a detail that seemed to elude everyone else. At first, it was nothing more than a nagging thought. Touring the affected areas, she couldn't help but feel there was an unusual precision to the fire's devastation. Satellite images of the city displayed clusters of ignition points, but something about their distribution didn't sit right. The fires weren't just following the usual chaotic paths driven by wind and terrain, they seemed to align in a peculiar pattern. The more Kamala examined the reports and spoke with first responders, the more convinced she became that these fires were not as random as they appeared. "It's like they're following a roadmap," a firefighter mentioned in passing, echoing the unease she herself felt. Satellite data confirmed her suspicions: ignition points appeared in a sequence too deliberate to be dismissed as mere coincidence. Determined to dig deeper, Kamala turned to environmental scientists and fire analysts. Their initial response was skeptical: after all, wildfires often behave unpredictably. But when presented with her observations, even the experts couldn't deny the peculiarity. Some attributed it to climate change, others to human negligence, but Kamala wasn't convinced. Her gut told her there was more to this than met the eye. While the media focused on the devastation, Kamala quietly began piecing together a larger puzzle. Could these fires have been orchestrated? And if so, for what purpose? The thought was chilling. The deliberate alignment of ignition points suggested intent, an unseen hand manipulating the flames. As questions swirled in her mind, one thing became clear: this was no ordinary wildfire season. Someone, somewhere, wanted this chaos, and uncovering the truth would come with risks Kamala was willing to face. Little did she know, the answers she sought would unravel a web of greed, corruption, and danger far beyond anything she could have imagined. Determined to uncover the truth behind the unusual patterns she'd observed, Kamala Harris set out to investigate further. The devastation in Los Angeles was undeniable, but her instincts told her there was more to the story than nature's fury. With a calm but determined demeanor, she began to collaborate with local experts, firefighters, and environmental scientists to piece together the puzzle. What she discovered would take her deeper into a web of intrigue than she had ever anticipated. Her first step was consulting firefighters on the ground, individuals who had spent decades battling wildfires. During one conversation, a seasoned firefighter shared a chilling observation: some of these fires don't feel natural. They're starting in areas that shouldn't be as vulnerable, and they're spreading too quickly. Another mentioned strange reports from their teams, sightings of low-flying drones in the vicinity of ignition points just before the fires erupted. These comments, though anecdotal, aligned with Kamala's suspicions. Kamala then reached out to environmental scientists who specialized in wildfire behavior. Using satellite imagery and historical data, they analyzed the ignition sites and confirmed her observations. The fires appeared to follow a deliberate sequence, as if ignited systematically. This doesn't align with typical wildfire patterns, one scientist admitted, pointing to the peculiar alignment of the fires on a digital map. As she delved deeper, Kamala began noticing another pattern, one that extended beyond the fires themselves. She requested public records of recent land purchases in fire-prone areas. What she found was startling: a series of transactions, many completed just months before the fires, involving high-value properties in areas now reduced to ash. These properties had been bought at inflated prices by a handful of corporations operating through shell companies, masking their true owners. One name, however, kept resurfacing: Solvista Holdings, a little-known entity with a growing portfolio of land acquisitions in California. A closer look revealed troubling details about the company and its CEO, Victor Grayson, who had been previously implicated in environmental violations and aggressive redevelopment projects. Kamala found evidence that Solvista had lobbied extensively for relaxed regulations on rebuilding in fire-affected areas, rules that would fast-track construction once the land was cleared. Adding to the intrigue were reports from residents in fire-ravaged neighborhoods. Kamala met with evacuees who recounted hearing strange sounds, loud booms at odd hours, and seeing unmarked utility trucks in the days leading up to the fires. One woman showed Kamala a blurry photo of a drone hovering near her property, its silhouette unmistakable against the smoky sky. The pieces were beginning to fit together. Could the fires have been deliberately set to clear land for redevelopment? The implications were horrifying: entire neighborhoods destroyed, families displaced, and lives lost, all for profit. As Kamala compiled her findings, the picture became disturbingly clear. The wildfires weren't just a natural disaster, they were a calculated act of greed, orchestrated by powerful entities willing to go to any lengths to achieve their goals. But as the vice president prepared to take the next steps in her investigation, she knew she was treading dangerous ground. The deeper she dug, the more powerful her adversaries seemed, and it was only a matter of time before they realized she was onto them. The mystery of the LA wildfires had turned into something far darker, and Kamala was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As Kamala Harris delved deeper into the mystery behind the Los Angeles wildfires, she quickly realized that uncovering the truth would not come without resistance. The deeper she pushed, the more barriers she encountered. At first, it was subtle, dismissive comments from officials and experts. Wildfires are unpredictable, they said. There's no evidence to suggest anything unusual here. But Kamala knew better. The patterns, the land acquisitions, the drone sightings, it was all too deliberate to be coincidence. Her inquiries were met with skepticism from local authorities. Fire departments and emergency response teams, overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster, had little time for what they viewed as speculative theories. Some brushed off her concerns as the product of overthinking in a time of crisis. Others insisted that seasoned investigators were already handling the matter. But Kamala couldn't shake the feeling that she was being stonewalled, not out of incompetence, but out of a desire to keep her quiet. As her investigation gained momentum, the pushback grew more aggressive. Anonymous warnings began to trickle in. The first came in the form of an email with no sender, reading simply, "Stop asking questions." Then there was the cryptic note left on her desk during a late-night briefing, "Some fires burn too hot. Watch yourself." It wasn't just the warnings that unnerved her. Kamala began noticing a black SUV parked near her residence and following her car during commutes. A harmless coincidence, perhaps, but the feeling of being watched became impossible to ignore. During one of her visits to a fire-affected neighborhood, she caught sight of the vehicle lingering at the edge of the street, its tinted windows concealing whoever might be inside. Pressure from powerful entities soon followed. Lobbyists from the very corporations tied to the suspicious land deals began to appear, insisting that Kamala's inquiries were unfounded and detrimental to California's rebuilding efforts. Subtle threats were wrapped in polite words, warnings about political fallout, strained alliances, and accusations of misplaced priorities. Despite the intimidation, Kamala refused to back down. She knew the truth was out there, and the closer she got to it, the more desperate her adversaries became. Each warning, each roadblock, only strengthened her resolve. The stakes were high, but Kamala understood that giving up now would only allow those responsible to escape justice. The firestorm she was uncovering wasn't just in the flames, it was in the shadows of greed and corruption that sought to silence her. As Kamala Harris continued piecing together the fragments of her investigation, the threads began to converge on a single name, Solvista Holdings. At first glance, the company appeared to be a low-profile real estate firm with interests in land development. But a deeper dive into its activities revealed a far more sinister agenda. Public records showed that Solvista Holdings had been quietly acquiring properties in fire-prone areas for months before the wildfires erupted. These purchases were unusual. Not only were they concentrated in high-risk zones, but they were made at inflated prices, defying market logic. Why would any company willingly invest so heavily in areas vulnerable to destruction? Kamala couldn't ignore the implication. Solvista wasn't betting against the odds, they were creating them. Her suspicions were confirmed when she gained access to internal emails from the company, thanks to whistleblowers within the industry. These emails were damning. One particularly chilling message from Victor Grayson, Solvista's CEO, read, "Ensure the sites are cleared on schedule. Delays will cost us more than the fires themselves." The language was coded but clear. Solvista wasn't just prepared for the fires, they were counting on them. Further investigation unearthed financial records tying Solvista to suppliers of specialized drones. These drones, equipped with incendiary devices, matched eyewitness accounts of strange aerial activity near ignition sites. One piece of footage, captured by a local resident, showed a drone hovering briefly before releasing a bright flare that ignited the dry brush below. The precision was undeniable, and the timing left no room for coincidence. Kamala also uncovered evidence of Solvista's extensive lobbying efforts to loosen regulations on rebuilding in wildfire-affected zones. The company had been pushing for expedited construction permits, ensuring they could redevelop devastated areas at record speed, and enormous profit. It was a calculated scheme: clear the land, rebuild quickly, and capitalize on lucrative redevelopment projects. The scale of the conspiracy was staggering. Solvista Holdings wasn't just profiting from the wildfires, they were orchestrating them. The flames that had consumed neighborhoods and displaced thousands were part of a deliberate plan fueled by greed. With drone footage, incriminating emails, and financial documents in hand, Kamala knew she had enough evidence to expose the truth. But as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, so did the danger. She had uncovered the culprits, but now she faced the daunting task of holding them accountable, knowing full well that Solvista's reach extended far beyond the fires. With the evidence in hand, Kamala Harris knew the time had come to expose the conspiracy behind the Los Angeles wildfires. The stakes were higher than ever, thousands of lives had been upended, entire neighborhoods reduced to ashes, and communities left reeling from the devastation. She couldn't let the perpetrators of this calculated destruction go unpunished. Kamala began by reaching out to trusted investigative journalists known for their relentless pursuit of the truth. Among them was Linda Moreno, a respected journalist with a track record of exposing corporate malfeasance. Kamala presented the damning evidence: drone footage capturing incendiary devices being deployed, emails outlining Solvista Holdings' deliberate plans, and financial records tying the corporation to the devastation. As Linda pored over the documents, her expression grew grave. "This isn't just corporate greed, it's criminal," she said. Together, they strategized on how to break the story while ensuring the safety of the sources and the integrity of the investigation. They knew this wasn't just a fight against a corporation, it was a battle against a system that allowed such corruption to thrive. Kamala and Linda worked tirelessly to craft a comprehensive exposé. The report detailed how Solvista Holdings orchestrated the fires to clear valuable land for redevelopment, leveraging drones and insider knowledge of fire-prone areas. It revealed the company's connections to lobbying efforts, which ensured rapid rebuilding permits that would maximize their profits. The exposé included interviews with displaced residents, firefighters, and environmental experts who corroborated the evidence. When the story broke, it sent shockwaves across the nation. News outlets picked up the story, broadcasting the revelation to millions. The public was outraged. Images of charred homes and tearful families were juxtaposed with evidence of corporate greed and deliberate arson. The narrative was no longer about uncontrollable wildfires, it was about a calculated act of destruction. Protests erupted across the country, with people demanding accountability from Solvista Holdings and justice for the families who had lost everything. Outside the company's headquarters, crowds gathered with signs reading, "Greed fueled the flames," and "Justice for the victims." Activists called for sweeping reforms in land acquisition laws and stricter oversight of corporations operating in high-risk areas. The fallout was immediate. Federal authorities launched a full-scale investigation into Solvista Holdings and its executives. Victor Grayson, the CEO, went into hiding as the evidence mounted against him. Lawmakers, pressured by the public outcry, introduced legislation to regulate land purchases in fire-prone zones and prevent future disasters from being exploited for profit. Kamala's role in exposing the conspiracy drew widespread admiration. She stood before the media and addressed the nation. This was not just a natural disaster. It was a human-made tragedy, driven by greed and disregard for the lives and communities affected. "We will not let this stand." Her words resonated, inspiring others to demand accountability and justice. Despite the victory, Kamala knew this was just the beginning. The fight against corporate corruption and environmental exploitation was far from over. But for now, the truth had prevailed, and the nation had rallied behind a cause that could spark lasting change. The fallout from the Solvista Holdings exposé marked a turning point in the fight against corporate corruption and environmental exploitation. Public outrage led to immediate action, as lawmakers and regulators scrambled to address the systemic failures that allowed such a tragedy to unfold. Within weeks, sweeping reforms were introduced to prevent similar disasters from being exploited for profit in the future. New legislation tightened land acquisition laws, mandating greater transparency and scrutiny in transactions involving high-risk areas. Developers were now required to disclose their plans for rebuilding and adhere to strict environmental impact assessments. The loopholes that had allowed corporations like Solvista Holdings to operate in the shadows were effectively closed. Additionally, an independent task force was established to investigate corporate practices in wildfire-prone regions. This task force not only targeted Solvista but also expanded its reach to examine other entities that might have benefited from similar schemes. High-profile executives, including Solvista's CEO Victor Grayson, faced charges of conspiracy, fraud, and arson. Grayson's eventual arrest and extradition became a symbolic victory for those demanding accountability. The reforms didn't stop there. Fire prevention measures underwent a complete overhaul. Investments were made in advanced monitoring systems, including satellite surveillance and drone technology, to detect and suppress wildfires before they could spiral out of control. Training programs for firefighters were expanded, and emergency response teams were equipped with better resources to handle large-scale disasters. Amid these sweeping changes, Kamala Harris took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. In a televised address, she spoke directly to the people. The wildfires we faced were more than a natural disaster, they were a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked greed. But together, we uncovered the truth, and we showed that justice, though difficult, is always worth pursuing. Kamala emphasized the importance of vigilance in holding those in power accountable. She acknowledged the courage of the whistleblowers, journalists, and everyday citizens who had come forward to share their stories, often at great personal risk. "This victory belongs to all of us," she said, "because we refuse to look away. We refuse to let corruption go unanswered." Despite the reforms and the arrests, Kamala knew the fight was far from over. She urged the nation to remain vigilant. Corruption doesn't thrive in the shadows, it thrives when we stop paying attention. Let this be a lesson that no one is above the law, and that standing up for what's right can truly make a difference. For Kamala, the experience had been transformative. It reaffirmed her belief in the power of truth and the resilience of communities united for a common cause. Though the road ahead would undoubtedly bring more challenges, the progress made was a testament to what could be achieved when people stood together against injustice. The legacy of the Los Angeles wildfires became one of change and hope. The reforms sparked by the tragedy not only rebuilt communities but also restored faith in the power of collective action. Kamala's efforts proved that, even in the face of overwhelming odds, courage and determination could light the way forward.